We have seen a ton of dramatic revelations in One Piece in these last few chapters. The survival of Ohara, Jewelry Bonnie's identity as Kuma's daughter, the Void Century's technology, and the destruction of Lulusia. The series has been one shocking twist after another for a while now, but one earth-shattering twist was easy to miss. We are going to be breaking down what we learned about Monkey D. Dragon's history and what it means for the future of One Piece. Let's get into it. But before we get into all that, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. We all know the name of the game, but maybe you don't know its call to fame. Raid Shadow Legends is a team-building fantasy game available on both mobile and PC with hundreds of unique characters to collect, upgrade, and battle with. And by using our QR code on screen or hitting the link in the description, you'll be able to experience the magic of Raid yourself. I for one have been using the likes of Herndig and Cleopteryx. Herndg's gunfire is cool, but I just think it is funny how he swings his hammer. Cleopteryx hits hard, and thankfully, it wasn't very hard to get her since all it takes are daily logins. Now, Raid Shadow Legends just released a brand new faction to the game, the Sylvan Watchers. They've got new champions for Forest Elves, Ents, Druids, and Fays. They have plenty of events planned, along with a brand new season of the Forge Pass, which is some of the strongest gear the game has ever seen. Oh, and if you have Amazon Prime, you can benefit from even more in-game rewards. Speaking of which, new players can use our QR code on screen or the link in the description to get a free starter pack worth about $30. And that is in addition to the free champion, Verges. You'll find them all here in your inbox, but only for the next 30 days. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring the video, but without any further delay, let's get into it. Who were the Freedom Fighters? In chapter 1066, we learned that prior to founding the Revolutionary Army, Monkey D. Dragon was already leading a similar group. These like-minded friends aren't given a clear name. We only know them as the Freedom Fighters. What's interesting is that this name seems to be a misnomer. While the revolutionaries were formed to fight the royal government directly, Dragon's original group was much more subtle. Vegapunk was surprised to learn his old friend was even considering waging direct war against the Navy. They had a very different goal in mind, one that Vegapunk implies required diplomacy and changing people's opinions over time. There is a ton of mystery still surrounding the Freedom Fighters. We've only just learned that this group ever existed. There is no clear information on who had joined Dragon's original rebellion or what they planned to do. The one thing we do know is that they existed 22 years ago and that Dragon was their leader by that point. However, we do have some additional context from the flashback in 1066. Dragon and Vegapunk's discussion touches on the group, if only in passing. We can use the conversation to make some simple deductions about who could have been a freedom fighter. And if we get a feel for their roster, we can work out what they plan to do. So, what clues do we have to work with? Firstly, we can use the timeline to narrow things down. The Freedom Fighters were friends of Dragon during his early years. This narrows our search to characters who were active prior to the destruction of Ohara. Anyone born after that date or who wouldn't have been on the sea at that point in time is ineligible. This rules out most of our younger characters, and then the older ones like Fisher Tiger or Nefertiti Cobra who weren't in a position to team up with Dragon. Ideally, they should have been at sea for a while before this point. Vegapunk's time with the Freedom Fighters seems distant from the destruction of Ohara. Anyone just setting out to sea for the first time 22 years ago would have been an unlikely candidate. 2. They were not employees of the world government. Dragon's conversation with Vegapunk makes it clear how disgusted he is that the Good Doctor is working for the Celestial Dragons. Whatever he may think of Vegapunk personally, the association alone is enough to outright enrage Garp's son. If any other members of this group were embedded within the Navy, Dragon's intense reaction wouldn't make much sense. This likely rules out any senior names, most notably Garp and Sengoku. They may have their own issues with the Celestial Dragons, but they weren't part of this outfit. 3. They were poor. Vegapunk remarks on how Dragon's ramshackle operation couldn't help him afford the tools and materials he would need to build stuff. This rules out anyone who had significant wealth or power 22 years ago. That limits us both in terms of legitimate authorities and illegitimate ones. Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido are all out of the picture, as are the Fishman Island royal family. So, who are we left with, and what could they possibly have been up to? Well, before we get into all that, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on, and hit that like button for some plot armor today. Now, let's investigate. The Swordsman, Shimotsuki Koushirou. Koushirou was Zoro's teacher and Kuina's father, son of Shimotsuki Kozaburo, who fled from Wano 55 years ago. He is a very peaceful old man, content to stay back on his island rather than head out to explore the world. The now retired Swordmaster doesn't seem like much of a revolutionary, more interested in training the next generation than changing the world himself. However, Koushirou is the one figure who was almost certainly a part of the freedom fighters. When escaping Goa, following the destruction of the Great Terminal, the Revolutionary Army received direct assistance from Isshin Dojo. Koushirou, its sensei, had to have signed off on that. Dragon's ship must have come to Shimotsuki knowing that they would be able to get supplies from his old friend. And Koushirou proved them entirely right. Resisting the world government is not something done casually. We don't know exactly when Koushirou took charge of his family dojo. It is very conceivable that it happened later in life. Presumably, anyone who has studied the blades to such an extent has to have seen something of the world. It therefore makes a great deal of sense to suggest that the Shimotsuki heir ventured out to test his sword against other warriors, working to perfect his art, just as Zoro did much later. Perhaps he too dreamed of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. There is every chance he met Dragon out at sea. Koushirou is not an employee of the world government, and while they have a dojo, the Shimotsuki clan does not have the level of resources that a great inventor would need to work with. He fits every criteria we laid out. Interestingly, their temperaments also line up. Vegapunk noted that Dragon was not a fan of war, only founding the Revolutionary Army in reaction to the destruction of Ohara. Despite his skill with the blade, Koushirou echoes his old friend on that point, remarking to Zoro that the greatest swordsman is one who can protect that which they care for. So, what goal could these two men have been working towards that did not require violence? Koushirou spent many years training his disciples in the way of the sword. Is he still pursuing some long-term plan to influence the new era, or has he given up on Dragon's old dreams? Kozaburo once told Zoro to be careful mentioning his past as a samurai, not wanting to draw attention from the Marines. This entire family may still be working to aid Dragon from the shadows. The upstart rookie, Sir Crocodile. It is surprising how much people change. We are used to Crocodile being a materialistic, powerful veteran pirate. He had wealth and status in Alabasta and was only interested in acquiring more of it. Even now, as one of Cross Guild's commanders and the power behind the throne, he is a Yonko in everything but name. A wealthy emperor with the sea of a whole fleet at his beck and call. This man does not seem remotely like someone who would be interested in working with Dragon towards any kind of altruistic goal. All Crocodile cares about is gold and power. However, people are never just one thing. 20 years ago, Crocodile was just getting started as a pirate. We know he had an associate of Ivankov at the time, and that he was a lot more idealistic, chasing a dream of becoming Pirate King. It's not too surprising that a young pirate aiming for big things would team up with the world's worst criminal. This would have all happened in Crocodile's early 20s, before he became a warlord and subsequently lost to Whitebeard. It must have seemed exciting to take on the system like this for someone so young who was new to the sea. He may not have had much money, but even as a new pirate, Crocodile would have been a useful friend to the freedom fighters. The Suna no Mi is an extremely potent devil fruit, giving the group a powerful defender against rank and file marines. Anyone lower than the Admiralty would struggle against Crocodile. With a ship and crew, Crocodile would have helped Dragon and his friends move people and resources wherever they needed. However, his true strength comes in organization. Crocodile is a cunning schemer, and highly skilled at networking. Whatever support the Proto-Revolutionary Army would have needed. Experts in a given field, mercenaries, goods, Crocodile could have procured them easily. This man was a massive manipulator who led a whole country into a devastating civil war. He is a strong ally and a powerful enemy. The big question is if Crocodile is still interested in Dragon's cause. The odds are good that he's not. His actions as part of Baroque works are clearly both ruthless and done purely out of self-interest. It is likely that if Crocodile had been a member of Dragon's group, he had left their goals behind by the time we met him. However, there is a key point about Crocodile's activities during the Alabasta years that has never been answered. How did Crocodile first learn about Pluton? His entire goal of Baroque works was to retrieve the ancient weapon. The Civil War was engineered largely to enable him to access the catacombs. It is why he recruited Nico Robin for Baroque works in the first place. He had to have known that both the weapon and the poneglyph existed. Two closely guarded secrets thanks to the ban on the Void Century's knowledge. As smart as Crocodile is, there is no obvious source for him to have uncovered either fact. There is more to the Shichibukai of the Sands than meets the eye. But how exactly does this fit with Dragon and the freedom fighters? Did they know about the ancient weapons? Well, we're getting to that. The Witch, Dr. Kureha. It has been a long time since the Straw Hats visited Drum Island, but Dr. Kureha still lingers on the mind. Chopper's adoptive mother figure laughs a lot, but we have seen her get serious when it matters. There is a reason she flew Hiruluk's flag, no matter what she said about the quack doctor. A truly cynical person wouldn't have fought to defend a simple strip of cloth against Walpole. And so could she have led a more idealistic life before we met her? There has always been something mysterious about Dr. Kureha's past. We know little about her history. All we have seen is her current career on Drum Island. It is all too easy to assume that she's always lived there. After all, most people in the One Piece world stick to their homeland as much as possible. But Kureha was familiar with Gol D Roger's real name and the principle of the Will of D. Those are not widely known pieces of information. She has clearly traveled the world at some point in time. And so, could she have been a part of Dragon's group? Well, the time period matches. Kureha would have already been an experienced doctor 22 years ago. It is quite clear she is poor, given her habit of price gouging her customers. This is a woman who is very used to not having money. The only reason she has a nice home now is thanks to Walpole deserting it. And while she is now a part of Drum Island's delegation to the Reverie, she has never directly served the Celestial Dragons. The question becomes, what could she have brought to the table? Kureha's medical skills would have been of great use to the Revolutionary Army, but the Freedom Fighters were not about waging war with the world government. All we know Kureha has done is spend time on Drum Island, treating people, and watching over the castle. Could that have been helpful to Dragon? Or was his interest more in her scholarly work? Well, there is one possible need that Dragon's group may have had for someone like Kureha. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, as it is time for the last name on this prospective membership list. The final member of Dragon's group who gives us by far the biggest hint about the nature of their master plan. And this is some mind-blowing stuff because in theory, this is the man who actually brought the Freedom Fighters together in the first place. The Legend Gol D Roger. Did you notice that Vegapunk and Dragon never claim that the latter founded the Little Ragtag operation? He was simply their leader as of 22 years ago. That would be 2 years after Roger's execution in Roguetown. Nothing says Dragon was the one who first brought their organization together. He could just as easily be the second commander of the group, following in the footsteps of an absent leader. And listen, I know what some of you may be thinking. Roger and Dragon have never been directly linked in the story. The pasts of both men are far too mysterious for that. We've only ever seen a few glimpses of Roger's younger life, and Dragon remains a near total enigma. However, they have one associate in common, which makes some kind of connection between the two men almost inevitable. Monkey D. Garp. The hero of the Navy was Dragon's father and Roger's greatest foe. Both men charged Garp with looking after their newborn sons. Both men chafed after the tyranny of the world government. It's hard to believe Roger and Dragon didn't know each other. But hold on, the truth may go much further than that. In isolation, it feels like they would have been natural allies. It's easy to imagine a mischievous pirate Roger helping young Dragon sneak away from Garp to go have some fun. They could have had a similar relationship to the one Shanks and Luffy shared on Goa. Roger was 22 years older than Dragon, a veteran of the seas who could have easily filled a young heart with dreams of freedom. It is worth noting that the one time Dragon actually chose to meet up with Luffy was in Roguetown, Roger's homeland. Could this place have held memories for the world's worst criminal? If Roger was the founder, or even just a member of Dragon's freedom-loving cabal, a lot of pieces would start falling into place. We have seen multiple unexplained bits of knowledge from the older generation. Kureha's awareness of Roger's true name is an obvious one. Almost everyone only knew Roger as Gold Roger thanks to the world government's misinformation. But then, you have Crocodile knowing both the location of Alabasta's poneglyph and its rough contents. With Kozuki Oden on his crew, Roger was one of a handful of sources that had information from the poneglyphs. He ventured across the entire Grand Line on his final voyage for Laugh Tale. He could have easily been the source of Crocodile's basic information about Pluton, either directly or inadvertently. Now, neither of these individuals served on Roger's crew, though we do know that Crocodile attended his execution. How could they have gotten information out of him without some kind of direct connection to him? The simplest, most logical explanation for that is that Kureha, Crocodile, and Roger were brought together in an environment that encouraged them to share information. Working towards a common goal is the easiest way to explain that. Roger also fits all three criteria on the list. He had been active on the sea for a while, he is no friend of the world government, and he had no worldly holdings we know of outside of Laugh Tale. But hold on a minute, what goal could have possibly united Roger, Dragon, Kureha, Koushirou, and Crocodile? The Freedom Fighters' master plan. It is easy to forget due to the structure of the flashback, but Roger's travel to Laugh Tale took significantly longer than Luffy's. He first found Lodestar Island 39 years ago. That is 13 years before his encounter with Kozuki Oden. That is 11 years before the start of his final voyage to Laugh Tale. And listen, a small gap in time is understandable, but over a decade is extremely odd. We know from Inuarashi that Lodestar is supposed to hold the clues needed to tell a traveler that Laugh Tale exists and that the road poneglyphs are needed to reach it. Roger had a firm lead on the biggest discovery in history. Given how enthusiastic the Pirate King was for the prospect of finding this mythical island, why did it take him 11 years and the threat of imminent death to get started on the hunt? The sensible conclusion being that he was working on something else. Some other method of achieving his dream. Something that would require a lot of time, which he ultimately did not have. Finding Laugh Tale was only ever a means to an end for Roger. It would give him the wealth and respect to accomplish his actual goal. This very likely is what puts him into the orbit of the Freedom Fighters. We have one man with a grand idealistic vision of the future and a group that is also working towards some big unseen end result. If those two goals lined up, it would make a great deal of sense to say that Roger spent those years working with Dragon. This time period would include Roger's intervention in the God Valley incident. A connection to Dragon would help explain Roger's allegiance with Garp. Dragon would have made a natural middleman, able to broker a truce between the two longtime rivals. If this theory holds, then the Freedom Fighters were actually working towards something similar to what Roger accomplished. Given the fact that Roger died smiling, it is safe to say that finding Laugh Tale and inspiring the golden age of piracy fulfilled some part of this mysterious hidden wish. A reinvention of the world order, something that would affect a lot of people. Vegapunk's attempts to get world government officials on board implies that this may not have involved the complete destruction of the world government. So what ticks both boxes here? What could grant new freedom to the world without toppling the Celestial Dragons? There are multiple options here. Given the diversity of perspectives, the Freedom Fighters likely had some difficulty at first deciding on a goal. If all they want is more freedom, what could have possibly been the best way to accomplish that? Some may have been interested in the discovery of new land, territory deep in the New World that lay far outside the world government's control. Others may have been more invested in persuading the Navy to loosen its regulations around travel, helping people explore and see the wider world. However, it is likely that Roger gave the Freedom Fighters something more specific and concrete to shoot for. Lodestar Island does not just show you the way to Laugh Tale. It grants you knowledge of the Great Kingdom. We now know that this ancient civilization was extremely technologically advanced. They built giant sentient robots and were likely the ones who created the devil fruits in the first place. Anyone who set foot on Lodestar would have access to the knowledge we just gained from Egghead Island. And so, could the ultimate dream of the Freedom Fighters have been to rediscover space travel? And listen, I know, crazy, right? But hear me out, as fantastical as it may seem, this is starting to look more and more plausible. We have known that interstellar travel was possible in the One Piece world for a while now, thanks to the ending of Skypiea and the subsequent Enel cover story. An attempt to rediscover this technology fits all the information so far, both for what the Freedom Fighters might have wanted and for what we know of Roger's dream. It is something that would take immense wealth and power to accomplish. As Punk Atlas would tell you, science does not come cheap. It is something that a young boy like Luffy could come up with, and that Whitebeard dismissed as a childish fantasy. And he certainly would not be the last to dismiss it as such. The same was the case with Sabo and Ace, and pretty much the entirety of the Straw Hat crew. Yet it would be the ultimate freedom and the ultimate adventure. To go from a world limited by petty self-serving men to a new frontier. All of the Freedom Fighters we have outlined would have been needed for such an undertaking. Koushirou and his students would give the project a security team. Crocodile could handle logistics. Kureha and Vegapunk would be needed to understand and recreate the ancient science, providing the basis for a strong ship and one that can endure the health demands of space flight. Add on a captain with a flair for dramatic voyages, and you would have the ultimate ship ready for the greatest journey in history. This grandiose goal also explains Roger's delay between Lodestar and Laugh Tale. Lodestar showed him that his dream was truly possible. It likely had some record or evidence of space travel, but not a working model. There was no guarantee that there would be one on the final island either. He saw Laugh Tale at the end of his life, hoping it held what he needed to finally make that dream a reality. A working spaceship, an intact set of blueprints, or even enough treasure to let Vegapunk finally invent in peace. It is a vision that could have tempted Dragon and Roger alike. Escaping the world would mean no more world government, no more boundaries. You wouldn't even be limited by gravity in which direction you felt like exploring. Anyone dissatisfied with life under celestial rule could simply leave, head off to find some new planet to explore. You can see the appeal, but also why Dragon ultimately gave up on the idea. With the world government keeping their boot firmly on the neck of the people, they couldn't wait around for Roger's golden age of piracy to bear fruit. Couldn't trust in Vegapunk to get the world nobles to lift the ban on void century research. They had to form the Revolutionary Army, both to defend islands like Koushirou and ultimately to overthrow the world government. Saving the world they had took priority over fantasizing about ones they don't. But hey, now Luffy's here. Dragon's son has shown up to follow in Roger's footsteps, reach Laugh Tale, and finally make that dream a reality. If the first Pirate King really was shooting for the stars, that is where Luffy's journey will take him as well. But what do you think? Could the Freedom Fighters have had some other goal? Is there anyone else you think could have been a Freedom Fighter? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.